These are 8 Harry Potter fan theories that hold up so well, even J.K. Rowling has had to respond to some of them directly. 4 are famous, 4 are obscure, and all 8 will change how you read the series. We're going to move through these roughly in order of how well known they are, ending with the ones that might genuinely be new to you, even if you've read these books a dozen times. First up is the one Rowling herself called her favorite. Theory 1. Dumbledore is Death. Buried inside the Tales of Beedle the Bard is a story called The Tale of the Three Brothers, and it's the key to this entire theory. 3 brothers cheat Death by building a bridge over a dangerous river, and Death, furious but impressed, offers each of them a prize. The eldest asks for an unbeatable wand, the Elder Wand, and ends up killed in his sleep after boasting about it. The middle brother asks for the power to bring back the dead, gets the Resurrection Stone, and is driven to despair by a love he can never actually reclaim, eventually taking his own life. The youngest brother asks for something that lets him hide from death completely, receives the invisibility cloak, lives out a long life, and finally removes the cloak and greets death as an old friend. This isn't just background flavor sitting in the margins of the series. It's a blueprint for 3 real characters. Voldemort chases the Elder Wand and dies essentially in his sleep, matching the eldest brother beat for beat. Snape spends his life chasing a love he lost, Lily, and dies in despair, matching the middle brother. Harry inherits the cloak, survives the entire war wearing it, and walks toward his own death willingly near the end, greeting it the same way the youngest brother greets his. If Harry, Snape, and Voldemort are playing the 3 brothers, that leaves one role unfilled: death itself, and the theory places Dumbledore there. Look at how the cloak actually reaches Harry. Dumbledore sends it to him in his first year with a note that reads, "Your father left this in my possession when he died. It is time it was returned to you. Use it well." Read one way, that's not a kindly gesture from an old headmaster. That's death handing down the family heirloom. Dumbledore has, at different points, possessed all 3 Hollows. He was the one person Voldemort genuinely feared. He was tangled up in the deaths of both Snape and Voldemort. And when Harry is struck by the killing curse and lands in that strange in-between King's Cross station, the first person he sees is Dumbledore, waiting for him, the exact image from the fairy tale. This theory got a personal stamp from the author herself. When Rowling was asked directly what her favorite fan theory was, her reply was, "Dumbledore as Death. It's a beautiful theory, and it fits." That's Rowling, on the record, calling it beautiful. She wasn't confirming it as literal fact. Dumbledore has an entire, very human backstory involving his sister Ariana, his relationship with Grindelwald, and the events at Godric's Hollow. None of which fit a reading where Dumbledore has secretly always been an anthropomorphic personification of death. But she didn't wave it off either. She said it fits. That's the sweet spot this theory lives in. Not canon, but better than canon. The rare case where the person who wrote the books looked at what her own text quietly built and admitted it works. Theory 2. Harry was a Horcrux, and it made the Dursleys cruel. This one starts from something genuinely unsettling that's already confirmed in canon. Harry Potter was, without knowing it, one of Voldemort's Horcruxes, a fragment of his soul lodged accidentally inside Harry the night his parents died. And the books give clear proof that Horcruxes aren't passive objects sitting quietly on a shelf. They actively poison the people around them. Slytherin's locket twists Ron's insecurities in Deathly Hallows until he abandons his best friends. Tom Riddle's diary manipulates an 11-year-old Ginny in Chamber of Secrets into opening the Chamber of Secrets without even her understanding what she's doing. So the theory asks a simple question. If objects carrying a shard of Voldemort's soul corrupt the people closest to them, what did living with an actual Horcrux do to the people Harry lived with for roughly a decade? Under this reading, Vernon and Petunia's cruelty wasn't just garden-variety small-mindedness. It was Voldemort's soul quietly radiating out from the cupboard under the stairs, making an already unpleasant family actively worse. Here's the problem, though, and it's a serious one. The timeline doesn't work. The Dursleys are established as cruel and hostile to anything unusual in the very first chapter of Philosopher's Stone, before Harry even arrives at their doorstep as a baby. Vernon is already sneering at abnormal people on his morning commute before he's laid eyes on his nephew. Being a Horcrux never seemed to affect the people Harry was actually close to. The friends he trusted and relied on at Hogwarts never showed any of the corrosive effects we see with the locket or the diary. The actual pattern in the books is that Horcruxes corrupt people who are emotionally invested in them or dependent on them, not people who simply happen to share a house. The Dursleys were never emotionally invested in Harry. They were cruel before he arrived, and nothing in the text shows them getting worse because of what he was carrying. Emotionally satisfying, sure. It just doesn't survive contact with the books. Theory 3. What was Snape's true loyalty? Now we get into a question that split readers into camps across the release of every single book. Some were convinced Snape was truly loyal to Dumbledore. Others were certain he was secretly working for Voldemort the entire time. And Sirius Black himself insists at one point that Snape is no one's man but his own. That question hit its breaking point at the end of Half-Blood Prince, when Snape kills Dumbledore on the Astronomy Tower. For an entire year, nobody knew whether Snape was a hero or a monster, and the evidence on both sides was genuinely strong. On the loyal side, Snape protects Harry and the Philosopher's Stone back in the very first book, and even Quirrell admits he never wanted you dead. He tries to catch Sirius Black when he believes him to be a dangerous escaped murderer. He reveals his dark mark to the Minister of Magic himself, at a real personal risk, to prove Voldemort has returned. He sends the Order of the Phoenix to save Harry and his friends at the Department of Mysteries. And it's eventually revealed that Dumbledore's death was arranged between the two of them in advance, since Dumbledore was already dying from a curse he'd taken from one of the Horcruxes. Snape was bound by an unbreakable vow, and the whole plan was engineered so that sacrificing himself and protecting Draco Malfoy would change nothing about the final outcome. In the end, Snape's loyalty traces back to Dumbledore, and beneath that, to Lily. Summed up in a single, devastating word: always. This became, by any measure, one of the most argued over questions in the entire story, spanning the full run of the series and outliving it. Nearly 2 decades after Deathly Hallows, readers are still arguing about it. The reveal didn't end the argument, it just gave it a new shape. Many readers now argue Snape isn't the redeemed, morally gray hero he's often framed as, pointing out his loyalty was never really about opposing the persecution of Muggleborns or standing against Voldemort's ideology on principle. It was about his love for one specific woman who never loved him back. His ongoing cruelty towards students, especially Neville Longbottom, gets cited as proof that whatever goodness existed in him stayed narrow and self-interested rather than becoming a genuine moral transformation. Readers tend to land in one of 3 places: firmly in Snape's corner, firmly against him, or somewhere unresolved in the middle. And which camp you land in tends to color how you read almost every other character in the series. No tidy ending here. That might be exactly why the argument has lasted this long. Theory 4. Dumbledore is a time-traveling Ron Weasley. Okay, this next one sounds ridiculous the moment you say it out loud, and then it gets uncomfortably convincing. The theory claims Ron Weasley lived a full life, grew old, eventually died, and then used a time turner to travel roughly 150 years into the past to relive it as Albus Dumbledore, giving himself a second chance to mentor Harry properly. The supporting details run surprisingly deep. Both characters are tall and thin with distinctive prominent noses, and Dumbledore's hair, when he was young, was red, just like Ron's. Both have a well-documented sweet tooth, with Dumbledore's office password system running almost entirely on candy and lemon sherbets ranking as his favorite treat, while Ron's Honeydukes obsession runs through the whole series. There's the wizard's chess scene from the very first book, where Ron plays a knight and then sacrifices himself to become king, which reads as a direct parallel to the roles the two of them play in the larger war. Ron, the knight, fighting on the ground, Dumbledore, the king, directing everything from above. Dumbledore's seemingly impossible foresight throughout the series makes sense if he's simply lived through all of it once already. Even the Mirror of Erised gets pulled into it, since Dumbledore claims he sees himself holding a pair of thick, warm socks, a detail that lines up with Ron. And there's a line from Harry in Deathly Hallows noting that direct contact between Dumbledore and Ron over the years had been negligible, which reads exactly like what you'd expect from a time traveler carefully avoiding his own past self. It's also one of the rare theories on this list with a direct, unambiguous answer straight from the author. When this theory reached Rowling, her reply was 2 words: false theory. And even without that response, the theory runs into real trouble structurally. Dumbledore is established as gay, and his great love was Gellert Grindelwald, which leaves no room for a secretly Ron storyline. Ron, meanwhile, grows up, marries Hermione, and lives out a documented adult life with no gap for a 150-year detour as Albus Dumbledore. Clever pattern matching, no doubt. Not true, according to the person who wrote both characters. Now, let's leave the theories you've probably already turned over and get into the ones that dig into far stranger corners of the books. Theory 5. Crookshanks was Lily Potter's cat. This is where things turn quietly devastating. The theory claims Hermione's odd, unusually intelligent orange cat, Crookshanks, didn't start out as her cat at all. That he originally belonged to Lily and James Potter, and after their deaths, he sat unwanted for years before Hermione happened to find him. The evidence starts in Deathly Hallows, in the chapter Creature's Tale, when Harry reads a letter Lily wrote to Sirius Black. In it, She mentions Harry nearly killed their pet cat as a baby while flying around on a toy broomstick, a birthday gift from Sirius. That's confirmation, straight from Lily's own words, that the Potters had a cat in their home during the summer of 1981, shortly before they died. Jump forward to Prisoner of Azkaban, where Hermione buys Crookshanks from the magical menagerie, and the witch running the shop tells her the cat has been there a long time because nobody wanted him. Under this theory, that's not a strange throwaway line. That's Crookshanks sitting unclaimed for over a decade, after his original family was murdered. The rest of the story fits in a way that's hard to shake. Crookshanks is established as unusually intelligent, with Sirius himself calling him the most intelligent of his kind I've ever met, consistent with him being part Kneazle, a magical creature known for uncanny perceptiveness. He develops an immediate obsessive hostility towards Ron's rat, Scabbers, who turns out to be Peter Pettigrew, hiding in Animagus form, the man who betrayed Lily and James to Voldemort. And he bonds instantly and completely with Sirius Black, the Potters' closest friend, the moment they meet, which lines up perfectly if Crookshanks somehow recognized him. None of this has ever been confirmed as intentional by the author, and there's a fair timeline objection too, questioning whether Crookshanks would realistically still be young enough over a decade later to behave the way he does in the books, unless he was just a kitten back in 1981. It remains pure speculation, but it's the kind of speculation that, once you notice it, it's very hard to unnotice. Theory 6. There was a wartime baby drought. Here's a detail most readers never think twice about. Harry's Gryffindor dorm only has 5 boys in it. Harry, Ron, Neville, Seamus, and Dean. 5 total. Extrapolate that out across roughly 10 students per house per year and 4 houses, and you land on a Hogwarts population dramatically smaller than the figures Rowling herself once gave. Somewhere between 600 and 1,000 students, depending on which interview you go by. And she's admitted she's not particularly strong with maths. Either way, Harry's actual year group doesn't come close to supporting a school that size. The theory offers an explanation. The wizarding world went through a baby drought during the years Harry's classmates would have been conceived, roughly 1979 to 1981, which was the absolute height of the First Wizarding War. Order of the Phoenix members were being killed. Death Eater raids were a constant threat, and under those conditions, fewer wizarding couples chose to have children at all. Harry's year isn't small by design. Under this theory, it's a scar left by a war, showing up 11 years later as an unusually thin generation. It would also explain the noticeably larger proportion of Muggle-born students that year, since Muggle families with no idea a war was happening at all kept having children at a completely normal rate the whole time. The more mundane counter-explanation is that Rowling's stated population figures simply never lined up cleanly with the class sizes she actually wrote, and this may just be an inconsistency rather than an intentional wartime detail. Even as an accident, though, it's the kind of accident that turns a background detail, 5 boys in a dorm room, into quiet evidence of a war's human cost. Theory 7. Dumbledore knew Quirrell was Voldemort all along. This one recasts the entire first book. The claim is that Dumbledore didn't stumble into the plot of Philosopher's Stone. He knew from early on that Professor Quirrell was hosting a fragment of Voldemort, and he deliberately moved the Philosopher's Stone to Hogwarts as bait, partly to test 11-year-old Harry Potter and partly to gauge exactly how much strength Voldemort had left. The evidence starts with what we already know, about Dumbledore's judgment as a headmaster. He famously rejected Tom Riddle's application to teach Defense Against the Dark Arts years earlier, and it's well established within the story that the position is cursed. No teacher lasts more than a year in their role. A brand new defense teacher, the same year the stone is being hidden at the school, is not a small detail. Quirrell himself comes back from his travels visibly transformed. A turban, a stutter, a constant twitchy fearfulness that reads very differently once you know what's underneath it. Then there's the protection around the stone itself. Dumbledore hides it inside the Mirror of Erised, using an enchantment so precise that only someone who wanted to find the stone but not to use it could actually retrieve it, which amounts to an essentially unbreakable safeguard on its own. And yet, on top of that already perfect protection, Dumbledore adds a whole obscure obstacle course. A 3-headed dog, a deadly plant, a giant chess set, that 3 first years managed to get through anyway. That gap only makes sense if the extra layers weren't really there to stop Voldemort at all. They were there to test Harry. Harry seems to sense this himself, reflecting at the very end of Philosopher's Stone, "I think he wanted to give me a chance." There's evidence for Dumbledore's foresight later in the series too. In Goblet of Fire, when Harry tells Dumbledore that Voldemort used his blood in the resurrection ritual, the text notes, Harry thought he saw a gleam of something like triumph in Dumbledore's eyes. That's not the reaction of someone caught off guard. This reading feeds into a much broader interpretation that becomes hard to shake once you sit with it. That Dumbledore isn't just a wise old headmaster, but a master strategist playing a very long game with Harry as one of the pieces on the board. The obvious counterpoint is that Dumbledore openly admits, at multiple points across the series, that there are things he doesn't know and mistakes he's made, which complicates the idea that he was always several steps ahead. Whether this was a fully deliberate plan from day one or something Dumbledore pieced together and then leaned into stays genuinely open. Reread Philosopher's Stone with this theory in mind, though, and it's very hard to see it as a simple, low-stakes children's adventure again. Theory 8. Voldemort was incapable of love because of how he was conceived. We're ending with the theory most readers already treat as settled fact, even though Rowling's own words say something a bit more careful than the version most people repeat. The claim, Voldemort is fundamentally incapable of loving anyone because of how he was conceived. His mother, Merope Gaunt, was in love with a muggle named Tom Riddle Sr., who wanted nothing to do with her. So she dosed him with Amortentia, a powerful love potion, to force him into a relationship. That's how Tom Riddle, the future Voldemort, was conceived. The moment Merope stopped administering the potion, Riddle Sr. abandoned her immediately, revealing the entire relationship had never been real to begin with. The books are precise about what Amortentia actually does. Professor Slughorn explains it directly in Half-Blood Prince. Amortentia doesn't really create love, of course. It is impossible to manufacture or imitate love. No, this will simply cause a powerful infatuation or obsession. That distinction matters, because it means Voldemort wasn't conceived out of counterfeit love. He was conceived out of forced obsession, built on a foundation that was never emotionally real in the first place. It connects directly to one of the most quoted lines in the entire series. Dumbledore's warning in the very first book. If there is one thing Voldemort cannot understand, it is love. When this exact idea was put to Rowling directly, her actual answer was more careful than the version most readers carry around. Her words were, it was a symbolic way of showing that he came from a loveless union. But of course, everything would have changed if Merope had survived and raised him herself and loved him. She went further, adding, the enchantment under which Tom Riddle fathered Voldemort is important because it shows coercion, and there can't be many more prejudicial ways to enter the world than as the result of such a union. Read that closely, and she's not saying the love potion magically rewired Voldemort's brain to switch off emotion. She's saying it's symbolic, a way of establishing from the very start of his life that he entered the world through coercion rather than love. And what actually mattered afterward wasn't the potion itself. It was that nobody raised him with love once he was born. Merope died shortly after giving birth to him, and he grew up unloved in an orphanage. The absence of love in his upbringing, not a magical side effect of Amortentia, is what Rowling actually points to as the explanation. The theory isn't wrong exactly, it's just more mythological than literal. Voldemort really was born from something that wasn't real love, and he really was incapable of understanding love as an adult. But the mechanism was nurture, not magic. That reframing might be the most quietly devastating version of the theory. Not that Voldemort was magically broken from the moment of conception, but that he never got a single chance to be anything else. That's 8 fan theories that hold up far better than they have any right to. If you want to see what happens when we take this same kind of close reading somewhere the books never actually go, watch What If Harry Potter Attended Every Other Wizarding School next.